Welcome to the NeuroSpice Life podcast. I'm Hanna, a sexologist and sensologist.
And I'm Freya, an lexothermic counsellor.
And today we're talking about when we get labelled, when we just cannot get off a train of thought.
Yep. We get stuck. We're called rigid, inflexible. We're called all the things, stubborn, pig-headed, you name it. And we're arguing till we're blue in the face about a certain point. And then at some point we take a step back and realise that we're actually arguing two sides of the same thing.
So like the other person's using one set of words, you're using another set of words, but it's the same thing.
Same thing.
It happens with me and my husband all the time. Like we'll start down this track and then all of a sudden we'll be like halfway through this, like not a heated discussion, but we're both really passionate about our own like points of view. And then halfway through we're like, wait, hang on, are you talking about this? And I'm like, yeah, are you talking about this? And he's like, yeah. And then we're just like, oh my God, we've wasted all this time just arguing about the same thing.
The same thing. It happens all the time. And so it might be that you've got like the two different views and then you realise you're arguing about the same thing. Sometimes it can be as well where you're like set on a solution and like you're set on an outcome, but it's not actually solving the problem, but the outcome's the outcome. So we're just going to chug ahead and we're going to argue, we're going to fight the point, and then we stop, we take a step back and go, well, hang on, there might actually be other solutions here. There might be things that I haven't thought of in my big, beautiful brain.
Don't say that to my ego. How dare you?
I don't know if this happens to you, but it happens to me so much, and so many of my clients are the same boat. And it's like you might come up with a solution for something in your head. You know, you've been thinking about it a lot, like, because, you know, particularly autistic ADHD brain, right? Like, two things, lots of thoughts.
All the time.
All the time. So many times over, so many different ideas, and the ability to see detail and go down all the different rabbit holes and all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of like in my head, I solve the world's problems and then I come out with the solution. Often I forget to tell people, you know, the journey along the way. And then we come out with the end solution, and it's like, then that solution, like that is going to be the right thing. But it actually turns out completely overcomplicated, over-engineered it, and there could have been just like a simpler solution all along.
Yeah. I mean, this kind of links to our last episode where we were talking about the fact that we were getting marked down in school for not demonstrating the working out, right? Like the answer was the answer. So the answer is correct, but a lot of it is about bringing people on the journey. Yes. And I've never been particularly good with that because a lot of my hyperactivity happens internally. So to take them on the journey, for me, it's too long. Like it's too complex, and I can't
remember the journey. I don't know where my keys are. I don't know how we end up here.
But I can't appropriately also explain the thought patterns and the leaps, whether they're leaps to conclusions or leaps to different trains of thought. Like my reasoning, my way of thinking doesn't often translate to other people, and they can't understand why I've had that thought. And it's very similar, like be talking about or, you know, we're eating ice cream and then all of a sudden I'll start talking about the life cycle of bees. Now, why I've started talking about that is because I've got salted caramel, and then I start thinking about honey, and then I start sort of, you know, going down the pathway, and I start thinking about the fact that honey is bee vomit. But the interesting thing is that, yeah, that when you have all these amazing ideas, but you're not able to articulate all of them, but you're so stuck, you know that yours is the right idea.
Yeah, and that's a crazy thing, and sometimes it's not, because often I know it's madness. Like, but I'll tell you an example in our house. Like, literally, this was our conversation on the weekend, and so we've recently adopted 2 kittens, and they are adorable and they're amazing. So cute. We also have a very patient, amazing older blue heeler dog, and she's great. But I'm trying to solve for in my head how we can have space for everyone. They're indoor cats. We don't want them outside. We live near a main road, you know, and also as well wildlife where we are. It's not a great idea. And then we've also got complication children or child and friends, and, you know, trampolines and play equipment outdoors and doors constantly being opened. And when these kittens like get on the loose, it's like trying to catch a slinky made out of water. Like it's impossible. And there's 2 of the little bugs,
and they're not even orange.
And they just go so quickly, and then they're gone. And so in my head, I'm having all these nightmares about how do we keep the kitten safe, give the dog the ability to have a dog door again and be able. So anyway, I come up with the solution of basically building a cat net enclosure around every external door in the house. And, you know, rightfully so, I shared this idea with my husband. I was super proud. I'm like, we can do this one here and do this one here. He's like, fries. And that's one of my answers. Are we going to look like we're living in a prison? Like, is this going to give Crocodile vibes? And I'm like, yeah, it might. And he's like, and the leaf litter from the trees, is that going to catch on things? And I'm like, yeah. But in my head, I was like, but we need this. We've got to keep the cat safe. You know, I've seen the door left open 3 times today and I've been throwing myself at it and trying to seal the door, and we've got to keep the cat safe. So we've got to fence in all things, because then there's like a whole anti-chamber thing, and I'm like super excited. He's like, what if we just got self-closing mechanisms for the screen doors?
Yep.
Yeah. And I think that sums it up beautifully. Like that would work. But
that would solve the problem.
And it solves the problem. So now we've got that underway. You know, installation time 3 weeks, and a lot of nervous excitement till then. But I think it's a really good example of, often we can see all the data, we can see all the information, we can process, and engineer like almost like the perfect solution, and get really set on this is the outcome, this is what's needed. However, we miss the fact that I'm an external processor. It's really hard for me to make sense of my thoughts and be able to identify what's important, what's urgent, what's not, unless I've got that ability to somehow put them out of there, because there's just so many things going on, and like, you know, like almost like coloured roadways, like spinning round and, you know, different wheels, and it's kind of, you know, like it's hectic up there. And so that ability to put it out, and then that gives me the ability to kind of go, that's important, that's actually not important, that's an option, that's a priority. But I find if I don't do that and I don't externally process, and I know a lot of people I work with are the same way, and that's a big part of therapy too, right, is if you don't have that ability to process externally, it's really easy to get caught up in the detail, and then that detail start building towards an outcome, and suddenly you're fixed on the solution rather than on solving the problem.
Yeah, that's actually that's a big focus for my area of work as well, which is, what is the question?
Yeah.
Because if you come up with the answer without knowing the question, you don't know if you're actually trying to solve for the right thing.
Yes.
And if you don't talk it through with the other parties, with the other stakeholders, then you don't necessarily know if your values are aligned, if you're both working towards the same thing as an outcome. Yes. And so I love your example, because it's exactly right. It's like you've got different ideas on how to solve it, but the outcome is we're keeping the cat safe.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. It's
it's, you know, it's really simple. But in my head, I started with that problem, and that was great. But then I, you know, it's like, but what if this, and what if this, and what, you know, and then all this kind of stuff, and and my brain's not great at being able to disseminate what's noise and what's actually worthy of paying attention to. It's like, it comes back to that prioritization thing, and like in my head, it's kind of, it's like a big flat list, or like a galaxy of stars of all the things that I need to do. It doesn't go into like a nice little ladder. And so it's the same thing of like, you know, oh, cat run, you know, great, that's a good answer for one spot, but then my brain went, let's just extrapolate that everywhere. And, you know, because there was no one to actually go, hang on, whoa, what are the other options here? But yeah, it's wild. And then often with that monotropism that we've talked about as well before, which is that singular point of focus, if we then, our brain gets focused in on the solution is cat run, cat cages around every single door in the home, which, as I say it out loud now, is ridiculous. It's a very, very, very rarely husband Kimmy says, you're right, sweetie, I was wrong. It's ridiculous, that idea. But, you know, that's what my brain got, and all its monotropic glory was stuck on that, as that's the outcome, and convincing him of that's the outcome because I'd solved it all myself, when in fact I hadn't.
Yeah. I think it's not to say that there's not a level of trust in there. It's just that because we have a lot of pattern recognition, because there's a lot of understanding, you know, what the outcome look like, and potentially being able to see it from a variety of different angles. There's, I think, just this belief that other people may have valid opinions, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we believe that they have fully considered everything in the same way that we have.
Yeah.
I think the thing that we underestimate a lot of the time is that that diversity of thought can be so valuable, particularly when it comes to innovation, right? Like they've done a lot of studies that show that, workplaces, friendship groups, things like that, are the most innovative and the most collaborative when there's that diversity of thought and that wonderful sort of friction as well. So not arguing, not toxicity, just friction. And as a sexologist, I love that word too, because I think it applies to so many things, and friction is great. But there's just that wonderful moment of just like, that humbling moment, or dare I say, that sometimes we're not always right.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of it too can sometimes be also like, oh, I'm the one that said yes to the cats. I mean, we said yes together, but I was, the second agitator.
No, you said yes to one, and then there was two.
And there was two. But yeah, my daughter was the one who was driving the conversation, and I was supporting her in her problem solving and thinking about it. So I kind of feel like this is kind of I brought this plague upon our houses. I'm therefore responsible for it. And just being busy, and also kind of going, I don't want to burden somebody else with this. So in my head, it then becomes this 8-hour, doom scrolling intensive process of like researching and looking into different alternatives and options and in what realistically could have been a 5-minute brainstorming conversation. And it's like, I know that's one example, but it's probably one of like 500 examples this year, or when you're arguing about the same thing of like, I don't know what we're going to do with the upstairs window. And then it's like, you're talking about the same thing, you're arguing about it, and it turns out you're actually both thinking it's the same, like you're both talking about the same things. One's using the word blinds and the other one's using the word shutters. And what you're thinking they mean outside, they're thinking, you're talking outside or inside or whatever, and one of you's talking about the wrong type of window. And it turns out you're both actually saying the same thing, which is we need something to keep the heat out from the outside of the windows. Or we need something, on the inside to, the answer might be shutters or blinds or curtains. Again, this might be another argument that's happened recently. But
no, I was actually wondering if you were using my example, because I mean, we've been sleeping in our bedroom like for when we built it back in 2022, when it was finally finished, and we've never bothered to put a curtain on it's a slimline window, but we've never put a curtain on it. So every morning we wake up to the light, which is great for most people. But if you want to sleep in, it's annoying. And my husband and I have never been able to actually settle on whether it's shutters or whether it's a blind. Yep. And it's nice to know that I'm not alone in this. Is it a shutter or is it a blind, solution conversation? And sometimes I felt very blind, and so that's quite appropriate.
And I love that as well, because like at the end of the day, the exam question is, how can we stop that light coming in? What is the best way that we can do that? And it could be curtains internally, like it could be a range of different things. But yeah, how much can we spend that time, as you so beautifully said, like working on what's the question, what's the problem here we're trying to solve? And I think if we did that a lot more, there'd probably be a lot less bad friction, and a lot less difficult friction. And I think we've all been there, that, getting to that moment in an argument where you're 17 rounds through and all the rest of it, and you actually realise you're two sides of the same coin, talking about the same thing or something that is so close it doesn't really matter. It's not actually going to make a difference to the solution.
Yeah. And coming together too with that understanding and kind of going, well, most arguments stem from fear. And if you don't understand the other person's fear, where is this stemming from? Is it stemming from a fear of making the wrong choice? Is it stemming from a fear of spending too much money? There's so many different things and areas where fear can stem from. And if you're so trapped in your own sort of sphere of fear, so to speak, sphere of fear.
I feel like I want that on a T-shirt, yeah.
It's like I'm trapped in a glass cage of emotion. Anchorman fans out there, there's so many ways that those arguments can go wrong. Yeah. Because if you're trapped in your own perspective, if you can't meet somebody in the middle to understand, like, this is your fear, this is my fear, how can we work together? Because relationships, whether it's family, whether it's partnership, whether it's even in a workplace, you're part of a team.
Yeah.
And you're both there to work on and solve the problems together. And I know that in times, particularly in work relationships, where that bad friction has been there, it has been because the other side has like resolutely, completely ignored every single suggestion, every single opportunity to come together and meet in the middle. They are, this is my way or the highway. And like in our last episode, it's very much a case of, because this is, why I said so doesn't work with us. It's because, well, we don't work that way. We also have valid inputs. And I think for a lot of people, neurodivergent or not, the thought of being misunderstood sucks.
Yeah.
The thought of being ignored for me is worse.
Yeah.
Because if I've got a brilliant idea, but somebody else can't accept it, acknowledge it, whatever, because they've written me off as being too flighty or whatever. Oh man, see me go from 0 to 10 in 5 seconds flat.
We're often racing, people. We're often racing. And it's so funny as you say that too. And I'm like relating that back immediately to my own experiences, because again, that's what we do. It's how we relate. But like, thinking about that, there's this moment usually in an argument or where I can kind of feel almost like this visceral bit where I want to dig my heels in and I actually want to fight. And instead of doing that now, like that's my invitation to ask myself just to pause and use the good old counselling technique and go, tell me more about that. So, with like the cat run, I presented the grand vision of, prison house, cat run style 2.0. And then I get the immediate feedback of, that's not going to work. A house is going to look like a prison. It's going to catch the leaf litter and all the rest of it. And it's just like, tell me more about that. And then, getting more of that feedback about the problems with it. And I said, and then saying, I'm trying to solve the problem of keeping the cat safe. Then it stopped becoming an argument about should we do a cat cage to actually what's the solution for that. So just that ability to go, tell me more about it, understand their point of view, where they're coming from, just breathe it out, pause, and recognise it's not a personal failing. It's just your brain has done its monotropic, beautiful thing and has gone and solved all the information, devoted all our horsepower to that. We've collected the dopamines. They're in our backpack. We've mined that. We've solved the problem. We're getting a sense of achievement and accomplishment. And now we have to pivot and adjust.
Yeah.
And that's hard, but it's okay.
Curiosity can be really difficult too, right? Because if it feels like you're the only one reaching out and being curious, then it's kind of like, well, if that's not being reciprocated, then what's the point?
Yeah.
We're not getting anywhere. But it is often the first step for somebody else to feel safe in sharing. And if they're not reciprocating, you can also ask them to ask you.
Exactly. And, and just say, yeah, this is the problem I'm trying to solve. Can you help me? This is what I see the problem as. Do you see a different issue? Do you see a different problem? And, putting that branch out there. But, I mean, we've been together now 23-ish years and we're still working it out. So, like, it's one of those tricky things, and every person will respond differently in every relationship. But being able to notice in ourselves what's happening and manage what and control what we can control can be a really powerful step to reducing a lot of frustration and reducing a lot of that rigidity labelling.
Yes. Anything to sort of help us be a little bit more open-minded and flexible in that way of thinking is for sure. And I think you've actually just touched on something that we'll actually be talking about in next week's episode. The words, can you help me? They don't come naturally to us. And it's one of those things where we say, oh, there's a whole nother podcast episode about that. No, there really is a whole nother podcast episode about asking for help.
Yeah. And so I think that probably ties us up beautifully for this one, and why sometimes we can get fixed on the wrong thing, and some practical strategies to do to get unstuck. And we'd love to hear your stories in the comments about when you've been called rigid or when you've been stuck on the wrong thing, like you've tried to convert your house into a cat prison. We'd love to hear that stuff in the comments. And while you're at it, like and subscribe to keep up to date when new episodes drop.
Sounds great. And we're looking forward to talking to you next week. And until then, stay spicy.
Stay spicy.
You're listening to the NeuroSpice Life podcast
with Hanna and Freya, besties, brains, and more.
If you've enjoyed listening, follow us on YouTube or your favourite podcast app and share it with someone else who knows the sting of a sticky label.